Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here for the changing landscape of substance use and treatment. We're going to be talking about some of the trends that are being seen in substance use, whether it's the types of substances being used, how isolation is impacting substance use and so on, but also what's happening with treatment. What are some new treatment modalities that are out there, options for treatment, and again, how possibly the pandemic has been impacting that as well. My name is Kim Porter. I'm the executive director of Be a Part of the Conversation. Thank you to the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. We appreciate their support. We are partnering with them on a number of programs this year. This is number 3, I believe, so far in our program since September. And really happy to have Montgomery County folks with us, but absolutely, if you're from outside of Montgomery County, this is great for you too. It's no boundaries here. So glad to have you with us. We are recording this program, but we're really happy that you're here live because it's great to have some interaction with you. We hope that you'll submit questions throughout this program using either the chat or the Q&A box. So please feel free as your questions come into mind to go ahead and drop those in, and we'll try to address those when we get to the Q&A portion near the end of the program. But even though it's being recorded, your questions will not be visible on the recording or to the other attendees. Only the panelists will be seeing those questions come through. At the end of this program, you'll see an opportunity to take a survey. It should pop up on your screen at the end. We really appreciate your input with that, because even if you've been to our programs and completed surveys in the past, it just helps us to know, was this helpful? What would you like to know more about? Other topics you'd like to hear in the future? So please take a moment to do that. We really appreciate your time in doing that. The follow-up page for this website is conversation.zone/addiction. And some of those links will be shared in the chat, maybe a little bit later on in the program if they're not going in quite yet. But that's where you'll find the recording for this program, as well as some other supportive information. I always like to mention that we have parent partnership meetings. These are for parents, guardians, caregivers who care about someone who's been impacted by substance use. I'm the parent of someone in recovery. These meetings have been invaluable in my life the past almost 12 years now. But these meetings take place throughout the week. Most of them are on Zoom right now. And you can see that once you come to that section of our website, conversation.zone/partnership, that there are meetings listed on this calendar. So you can see Sunday through Thursday. The green buttons are all on Zoom, and then there are a couple that are in person or hybrid, but they are terrific. They are other parents who are going through the same kinds of things, and guardians and grandparents and other caregivers. So I'm so excited about this panel tonight. We have some really terrific folks with us. We have Troy Jackson, who's going to be talking about outpatient treatment. Val Cannon is with Miramont, and she's going to be talking about inpatient. She mentioned Troy's with Ethos Treatment. And then Brooke Shockley and I'm sorry I don't have Matt's name up here as well, but she and her husband, Matt Bartlett, are going to be talking about recovery housing. They're with Sunrise of the Spirit. And Ray is very gracious to be with us. He is a person living in recovery, and he's going to be sharing some of his experience. And we always like to say the most important person in the room, even though we're not in a room together. But I'm so glad that you're all with us. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to have Troy kick us off. Troy, you want to unmute?
All right, I'm like messing up already. I'm getting things. Well, it's good to see everybody, and thank you for having me here, Kim. And I'm great to be here with this great group of people. One of the things I want to say to you caregivers and parents out there, whoever you are, trying to help somebody in addiction, please be empathetic and have compassion for yourself in trying to help those people suffering from addiction. It's a very hard battle to fight alone or with others. Me even being a therapist, I find it is very challenging. So one thing I want to say to all of you listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for trying to become aware. But again, please be compassionate, understanding, and empathetic with yourself as you try to go through this battle, because it's a struggle even for therapists who've been doing it for quite a long time to find out the right way of doing it. How do we help all these thousands and millions of people that need our help? So give yourself a pound of back sometimes. Okay, with that being said, I'm gonna start with what I think, basically anecdotally, what are like the trends that I'm seeing coming through as far as people needing help around addiction. First and foremost, alcohol has not went anywhere. It's still here. It's huge. It's big. It increased dramatically during the lockdown, during the quarantine. And I'm not going to blame it strictly on that. There's other factors that I'm going to bring into play about that. But alcohol has been king and or queen, and it's just there. It's not going anywhere. What I find very disturbing about what's out there now as far as usage is cannabis. The reason why is it's not even looked upon by many people in certain age groups as being a drug anymore. Like everyone's just using it. It seems to be more and more in my work. I'm finding more people addicted to cannabis, abusing cannabis. I think the medicalization of it has made accessibility more really easily. The legalization of it, and I'm not going to get into a political issue about it, but I think it's become something that is just as well as accepted as alcohol. Therefore, with a substance that is vastly different than 20, 30 years ago, with such a strong, how do you say, potency, we are seeing a high level of addiction to cannabis. Some people are like, I can't believe you're addicted to cannabis. Or no, it happens all the time. And it's just there. It's everywhere. I feel sorry for a lot of people that have cannabis addiction or have went through cannabis abuse because you can't run from it. You just can't run from it. It's everywhere. Some of the other things that I'm noticing that are starting to come in as far as clients abusing or misusing cocaine. Cocaine's back on the rise. Huge, especially amongst college students. Huge. It's like the go-go 80s again in the 90s. Like, it's huge. And the scary thing about cocaine and certain other substances out there in powder form, it's being laced mixed with fentanyl. So you'll have people that are actually overdosing on cocaine, and you also have people that which boggles my mind, but I can get it because I'm in recovery myself, that will buy cocaine, test it with fentanyl strips to find out if it's laced with fentanyl prior to sorting the cocaine. And it's interesting that fentanyl strips at one point were like very cheap. The price for fentanyl strips to test for fentanyl is going up. Therefore, that means what? The demand is much higher for whether fentanyl and cocaine or people using drugs. The scary thing about it is, I was talking to a former client today, just trying to get a sense of things. It seems, and I'm not trying to be like the downer in the room, wherever Debbie or Donald, whoever name you want to choose, but it seems like addiction is constantly growing every year. And, for this case, we're talking about substance, but I'm talking about whether it be your cell phone, whether it be porn, whether it be shopping, which is made very easily. But all these layers of addiction in our society are just booming and booming and booming, and it's not going anywhere. It's getting bigger and bigger. So get back on track with the drugs, cocaine. After that, I would say we see a high spike in benzo use. And I'm talking about Valium, Xanax, Ativan. And here's the reason why, in my logic, and what I find is more and more people in our country and globally are using prescription medications. No problem. That's okay. But there's a lot of people who share prescription medications. Oh, you're feeling anxious? I'll take one of my Valium. You're feeling a little bit off ease? Yeah, I got a Xanax for you. And that accessibility and that availability is making these spikes go up in people trying things and liking things. Also, there's not as much of a stigma around using something to calm your nerves or to tranquilize you or to smooth you out amongst a lot of different cultures, groups of people in different age ranges. A lot of college kids now are mixing benzos with alcohol, which is a major no-no, right? It's a major no, but it's a new trend that's happening all the time now. Started a couple of years back, and it constantly seems to be growing. And so that's something else that we're seeing that we have to battle a lot more. And it's interesting where you once thought that you would see someone from an older population abusing benzos. It's not like that any longer. You're seeing people much younger, right? It's not the so-called, forgive me if I offend anyone, it's not the housewife at home any longer, right? That stereotypical image you think of somebody abusing a Valium or Xanax or something like that. We're also seeing a spike in what we would call hallucinogens. And I'm talking about mushrooms in particular, right? We're seeing a spike in that. But there also is some of these drugs that I'm naming, there's also like a cross between usage, right? Very rarely that I see one person coming in just strictly with mushroom abuse or addiction or dependency, right? It's usually some other, but we're seeing an increase in that. Now, when we start talking about microdosing, which I think we might get into later on, or I might, that's a whole nother ball game. But I think when the medical community started talking about psychedelic assisted treatment, right? I think we fell into the trap of a lot of people thinking, I can do this at home, right? You know what I mean? As Kim said too, we're talking about, I can homeschool this. It doesn't work out that well for most people. So we're seeing a spike in hallucinogens and things of that nature. When you look at what happened, as far as my experience, I think there was a shift after and during COVID of people not being what I term being caught, right? And so what I meant was people were staying home and drinking. People weren't being stopped on the road or the highway for drunk driving or a fender bender or things of that nature. And what that caused was an increase of accessibility, availability, and sustainability of how long someone was using the substance, therefore led to what? A greater sense of dependency, all right? So basically, when things kind of somewhat slowed down as a country, it made it a lot easier for people not to be caught in their offices intoxicated, right? By going out to a bar or restaurant, just those normal things that makes people, I would say, stop using any drug or substance or alcohol. Because usually most people just don't wake up and go, you know what, I think I have a cocaine problem, I'm going to stop. There's usually some exterior motivating force, and usually it's the law, husband, wife, partner, someone, somewhere, somehow says, hey, I think you got a problem. And I think with COVID, what happened was that, it was all very insular, kept at home, kept behind closed doors. But now what we're seeing in treatment, that's starting to come out of the woodwork. It's starting to be more exposed because we're starting to open up more, right? So when I think about treatment, from my point of view, I've been doing virtual treatment since the pandemic. Primarily, I would say almost 95% of it virtually. And with Ethos treatment, we have virtually, and we also have hybrid, and we also have in person. But being an outpatient provider, I have found a lot of success. Recently, the other day, people who, I know this sounds insane, I have clients that I have never met in person who just celebrated a year, right? Like 2 called me the other day, right? They've had their urine screens done, through setup, everything. So when someone says, well, virtual sobriety or virtual treatment or it doesn't work, ILP, it works. I mean, these men and women are proud to say, hey, like, we always joke, like, when I'm going to meet you, I'm like, maybe one of these days, right? But honestly, I have a few clients I have never met in person who virtually have gotten sober, right? Through testing and other means and going to meetings, 12-step community, smart recovery, Dharma, whatever other community accessible treatment that they want to use. So I talk too fast. If I do, somebody just go, hey, dude, slow down, send me a message, slow down. I get high energy, like Kim knows that. I just start going like crazy. So as far as treatment, as far as outpatient, IOP treatment for me has been working very well. And I think one of the things that has worked well out of it, though, it's made it more convenient for people to get to treatment. They don't have to drive. They don't have to park. They don't have to go far. And I have people sometimes show up in their robe and I have a, yo, buddy, can you like not show up in your robe? You know what I mean? It's like, come on, right? People are having cups of coffee. I don't mind about the normal things that distract from treatment. You're home. We have to expect that, right? But, the convenience of it, whether it's in a group format and or whether it's telehealth, such as, BetterHelp, I think there's one called Talkspace. There's one called Cerebral that basically works on having your prescriptions actually prescribed online. So it's not just from a substance abuse level, it's on all levels that telehealth is being implemented and being very effective. I read something the other day that said that they think that telehealth is just as effective and or possibly could be. Now, am I sitting here preaching saying that you shouldn't go inpatient? Nope. Am I saying you should not have probably hands-on face-to-face treatment? Not saying that at all. But some people don't have accessibility to that. Some people don't have the means to pay for that. And sometimes the, I'd say Zoom centered or what is it, Doxy or some type of video format is much easier for some people, right? For a lot of different reasons. What did I say? Mental health and Zoom burnout treatment teams. Oh, another things I'm seeing very much so in trends in treatment is MATs on on the rise, medically assisted treatment, whether it be Sublocade, whether it be Suboxone, whether it be methadone is still being used, or Vivitrol, right? We see a lot more clients, especially after multiple failures of trying to get sober without medically assisted treatment. They're saying, hey, you know what? Can we try something else for cravings? A lot of insurance companies, believe it or not, are pushing for medically assisted treatment. I find that very shocking, but because they have to pay for it, but a lot are actually saying, hey, like, you know, is the person on anti-craving medications? So you're saying, okay, here I am doing Troy's IOP. Here I am taking Vivitrol injection once a month. I'm going to my 12-step meetings. This is working for me, right? You know, this is working for me. There's what I call I guess you could say like a fence or like a barricade, however you want to call it. These people are putting themselves in like a structure where they're being enveloped and wrapped in recovery, right? And it's working for people. One of the things I think also though,
Hey, Troy.
yes.
I was just I'm sorry to interrupt you. For
Go
folks
for it.
who aren't familiar with medication assisted treatment, can you just briefly explain that?
Sure, not a problem.
Thank you.
Medically assisted treatment is something that's used to help people primarily a lot, it seems, when it's either alcohol or opiate abuse, right? And basically, these are substances that have been formulated together to give somewhat of not necessarily a high, but to not induce amazing cravings, right? And at the same time, also keep the person somewhat stable and have like an antagonistic effect with the one such as buprenorphine. I confuse names, which is used in Sublocade or Suboxone, with also naloxone, which kind of keeps it stable at the same time. So the person isn't spiking their high, but they don't feel those intense cravings that they would feel if they decrease usage totally and completely, which when you talk about opiates or alcohol, some people are very, very fearful to detox, especially on their own. So basically, a term of Suboxone, Sublocade, Vivitrol, these medically assisted, well, basically medicines that are used and prescribed to help with cravings, to help with withdrawal, to help with having the person find a sense of well-being in their body without being overly dopamine rushed by the normal high they would get by using fentanyl, opiates, or any other substance, to keep them at a level that's manageable where they can be receptive to treatment and they can be basically in their own body and comfortable enough to change, to shift, to become the person they want to become. So usually it's prescribed by doctors, not me as a therapist. There's some vetting process that goes along or examination process that goes along with it. It's not just anybody walks in and says, hey, I'm a great candidate for MAT or medically assisted treatment. Sometimes, you know, some people aren't very readily, I would just say, what's the right word? Doesn't work well for everybody. Put it that way. Let's keep it simple. It doesn't work well for everybody. Kim, was that good enough? I don't know. Let me know. All right. Thanks. Because you know me, I said I get going. And it's just like, slow down, Troy, right? Right. And yet, all of you on the panel, look, I try to keep my ego out of the room. If you have to stop me, ask the question, go for it. Doesn't bother me one bit. You know, it's not about me. It's about helping someone that needs my help and your help too. I also see a rise in EMDR and trauma-informed therapy, right? We see a great rise in that. And it's interesting. Trauma isn't often talked about because it's so specialized, right? But we do see when sometimes a client is almost what we like to call treatment ready. One of the things working outpatient, what I like to do is I like to say sometimes I work towards getting them treatment ready. What that means is that I have no problem referring them to another facility, inpatient in Miramar or Karen or somewhere. I have no problem with that. And sometimes the outpatient level gets them prepared for therapeutic intervention on a more intense level. So, whether I'm doing outpatient, I need my inpatient providers. I need my sober living providers because they also provide a place that clients can feel safe and feel comfortable to expand and to grow. And one thing along with that is, what I see also becoming something that's very, very big in treatment is having a treatment team. Okay. Now, with that, though, there becomes a cost prohibitive issue, right? One of the best, how would you say, one of the best things that anyone could do for long-term recovery is be in long-term treatment. One of the best things a person could do is have a complete team. If I had it perfectly for every client I came across, I would put them in sober living. I would probably have them do an inpatient stay. I would have them do an outpatient stay, and then individual therapy after that. I want to look at some trauma. I want to look at their fitness. I want to look at everything because I think the holistic approach is working more than just go to an AA meeting, go see your therapist, go to IOP, and that's it. Okay? It doesn't work. I think a holistic approach is where, as a community, we're trying to move towards. I think as a community, that's where we should be moving towards. When I like to say it this way, I like to do anything and everything that's ethically sound to help a client get sober, right? Yoga, I teach yoga myself. I'll invite them to my yoga classes with anonymity, of course, when I was teaching, right? I mean, whatever it takes. I think that's what we should do as providers, as parents, as guardians, and caregivers, within reason, if you have the means, right, to help that person find that balance in their life that will allow them to get rid of or to put to sleep, however you want to term it, that addiction that's causing as much harm as it is in their lives for them to need an intervention in the first place. Couple more things real quick. I think I'm hitting most of the main points. Yeah, I think that's really about it, Kim. I think I hit a lot of different points. I don't know if I missed anything, you can tell me. I got a couple more minutes or no?
I think we're good, and we can certainly circle back. I think if you're hearing some things that spark something, just make yourself a note and we'll circle back.
I appreciate it. And thank you guys for your patience, Rosie. And again, I'm a fast talker, so welcome to my world. And I don't drink coffee, so it's kind of scary.
It is scary. And you're a yogi. There's some incongruity there. I'm not sure what's up with that, but I love it. It's all good. Thank you, Troy. That was very helpful.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right, Val Cannon from Miramont. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Troy. Thanks for going first. I appreciate that. I have to do it a little bit more formal or I will definitely get sidetracked. So I'm going to, if everyone's okay with it, share my screen for a slide deck. Okay. Let's see. How do I get that down? All right, Kim, how do I, there we go. Okay, so my role on the panelists, first, thank you for allowing me to be a part of the conversation. This is really exciting for me. My role in this is to talk about the changing landscape of substance use and treatment in where I work as detox and residential levels of care. And I think Troy really helped segue me into my slide deck. So who are we seeing? And Troy mentioned alcohol use. So we are seeing primary alcohol use disorder coming into the detox and inpatient level of care. And for a lot of the same reasons that Troy talked about. So I'm gonna go through this as we get into further slides, but we really attribute this to the pandemic because we've seen a significant shift over the past 2 years in the substances coming through the door. We still do see opiate use disorder. I like to say polysubstance use because most people are not just using a primary one opiate. Fentanyl use, we are definitely seeing increase in methamphetamines, and we are seeing significantly higher levels of mental health coming through the door. So alcohol use disorder. Why? Why are we seeing more alcohol use disorder? Troy actually said that beautifully, so I'm not going to hit the same points he did, but the pandemic is where we're focused our attention on. So during the pandemic, you were isolated, you were in your own home, it was convenient. You could get away with a lot more with less consequences, as Troy had said. As we talk to our patients though, what they're reporting, and I'm gonna move this, I don't know if you guys can see here. I don't know if that's showing up for you.
No,
Okay. we had a lot of patients reporting they were increased symptoms of depression, anxiety, trauma-related symptoms, which led them to pick up alcohol that was easy to get as a use of self-medication to numb a lot of what they were experiencing in isolation. There was a lot of stress in the pandemic. I think we all can relate that, I mean, as a mom and parents of children, you were learning how to navigate working from home, maybe working in the office, being a virtual school teacher. You're constantly assessing activity participation. Is this safe? Is it not safe? Are my kids going to get COVID? Are my in-laws going to get COVID? And you're constantly thinking about things you would have never thought about before. You're also having limited support from your family, not because families didn't want to support each other anymore, but because there was fear. There was fear and anxiety about a virus that we didn't know. And so you were always thinking, now my kid's sick, they can't go X, Y, or Z. Who am I going to get to take care of them? Who does that fall on? Typically the parents. You're afraid to reach out to a babysitter. There's more fear in the world with the pandemic. Fortunately, we're seeing that shift a little bit up until Omicron came. But prior to this variant, we did see a shift, which was very helpful to management of stress. There was also significant job loss and significant financial strain on people. So there was extra stress related to how am I going to take care of my family? How am I going to take care of my bills? And the patients that are coming in the doors of inpatient are saying that that was like never experienced before. And they didn't have the coping skills on board to manage it. Even those individuals who were in very substantial periods of remission said they just couldn't do it. They lost touch of all of their coping, all of their support, all of their fellowship. And I'm also sure many of you probably recognized yourself too, that frequent or daily alcohol use became very normalized, if not even glorified during the pandemic. So you probably saw on social media, virtual happy hours, right? These were all ways that people attempted to stay connected with alcohol in an environment where you couldn't stay connected with anybody. Opiate use disorder. So we do continue to see a large portion of the population as primary opiate use disorder. Again, I talk about polysubstance use because very rarely is anything pure anymore. You don't know what you're getting on the street. You're not getting one substance. You're typically using a concoction. You may know about the concoction you're using. You may not know about the concoction you're using. And I think that that's important because our clients are not aware of everything that's in their substances. So when they come in to detox and inpatient, we do an evaluation. We talk to them about what they're using. What they're using does not always match what shows up on their lab screens. And that's a great conversation to have with them because more often than not, they have no idea that they're putting other substances into their bodies. With opiate use disorder, we still have a strong trend and a strong emphasis on medicated-assisted treatment options for opiate use disorder. So Troy, you said that beautifully, so I won't go in to depth there. However, recently we are seeing that there's higher AMA rates out of detox. So AMA is against medical advice. It's people aborting treatment early. We do see this higher with our opiate use disorder population, and we attribute that to the very powerful euphoric effect of opiates. And it decreases the tolerance for discomfort. So what happens is that these folks are doing great on their detox meds, and then within a couple of days, they can't tolerate the emotion and the physical symptoms that show up. So our medical team has had to alter some of their protocols. So we have people on extended tapers a little bit longer. That does go, obviously, there's a lot of assessment that goes into that because we are treating very insidious disease that's also very med seeking. But there are times that we legitimately believe that somebody needs to taper longer than what we're typically used to in order to stay long enough to get into the residential level of care to sustain and acquire skills to sustain sobriety. Medication-assisted treatment options. Again, Troy, thank you for already doing that legwork for me, but primarily treating alcohol and opiate use disorder. For alcohol, we use Topamax, Antabuse, Camprol, naltrexone, and Vivitrol, all of which curb cravings. Antabuse will make you sick if you drink on it. For opiate use disorder, we're using naltrexone and Vivitrol. Suboxone, buprenorphine, and naloxone is a combination in Suboxone, straight buprenorphine, or the Sublocade injection. The Sublocade injection has been a game changer for the MAT world because what it does is that it takes away the risk of diversion and abuse. It's an injection that goes into the stomach. So oftentimes some of the controversy with MAT is basically, is the person going to abuse it? Are they going to divert it? Are they going to sell it? And we see that in detox and inpatient all the time, that people are prescribed these meds and they're not taking them. They're doing something they shouldn't be doing with them. So Sublocade, game changer. If our treatment teams decide that somebody should be on an MAT, that's usually a very well thought out decision, but more often than not, we're going to point them into the Sublocade direction. It's safer. More recovery houses are accepting Sublocade as a form of MAT, which is very helpful. Today, we're seeing a lot more MAT providers than we ever saw before. So when MAT kind of became the thing specifically with the buprenorphine products, it was very difficult to find aftercare placement, very difficult to find recovery housing, very difficult to find outpatient doctors. And so we were prescribing and doing this great treatment plan in inpatient, well thought out, and then they were leaving and we didn't have a good plan for them. And we had to figure out how to do it differently so that we set them up for success. We're still challenging the stigma when it comes to MAT. The recovery community and the clinical community still has bias. I mean, I think we've gotten a lot better over the years, but a lot of our patients do talk about the challenges when they walk out of inpatient, attempting to engage in self-help groups, specifically 12-step programming, where a lot of people are very, very open. But you have to also remember that the addict brain is going to focus on those who are not and fixate on how they're different and how they're not accepted. So we still do have some work to do in this area, but I do want to verbalize that it's definitely improved. Methamphetamines. I felt like I needed to put a slide in here on methamphetamines. Just because, but methamphetamine use continues to be on the rise. We are seeing significant increase in overdose deaths related to meth and other stimulants. Typically, it's because it's adulterated with fentanyl or other substances. So a lot of overdoses are coming as a result of the opiate and the meth combining. Most significant piece to note about meth is the long-acting mental health symptoms that it presents. So it's very, very challenging to determine the difference between psychotic mental health disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis, versus the long-term effects of meth use. And that's because the psychiatric, what we call picture, it's why I put in quotation marks, the picture stemming from meth use can last weeks or months. And that includes paranoia, it includes hallucinations, it includes agitation, aggression, and that is very, very difficult to tease out and discern in our levels of care. So it takes time to stabilize, to get a better picture of what we're seeing. And then it can take the brain over a year to recover from meth use, depending on the quantity and how long someone's been using. I also felt like I needed to address the impact of COVID on treatment because it's drastically changed our treatment world, specifically that of the inpatient setting. We all know that COVID has created increased isolation on the outside. I think we all experienced that, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. But it's drastically impacted treatment now and still. So social distancing, when you had an inpatient setting where you could put 8 people in a room together in a nice small group room, very intimate, now all of a sudden you have to create 3 to 6 feet of social distancing between one person and the other. What that does is it creates space between me getting vulnerable with you. And embedded in the core concepts of addiction, don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel, are the 3 mistaken beliefs that we attempt to target when we're treating an individual who struggles. So we're constantly challenging talking, and we're constantly challenging trusting, and we're constantly challenging feeling. When you put space between 2 people, it's helpful to avoid the vulnerability. In addition to that, now we're talking about mask wearing. And I mean, I happen to work for an organization that's part of a healthcare system, and we take this very seriously. Fortunately, it's helped us out to stay operable. But mask wearing is a mandate. You have to wear your mask. So what does that do when you're wearing a mask? It covers half your face. And when you're attempting to build relationships with people, and you can't see their full facial expressions and you can't completely connect through their facial nonverbals, it's challenging. It's challenging to talk, trust, and feel, which is exactly what we're asking you to do. I do want to say our population is incredibly resilient. They have done a phenomenal job with this. They've way better than I thought they were going to do, but it does still change the way in which we operate through treatment, which to Troy's point is really a benefit of the telehealth services when you can see an entire person, an entire picture. So telehealth services is probably one of the best things that came out of the pandemic for behavioral health. So Troy, I support you in that it absolutely does work and it's absolutely effective. But I also want to talk about some of the challenges with telehealth when you talk about higher acuity or more progressed patients and higher levels of care, specifically maybe a partial hospital program, or people who really need intense accountability to stay sober. What we were hearing from patients who were coming back in the doors is that their telehealth platform was fantastic. And then it wasn't, because they started to go off. And they lacked the accountability that they would have had in person. Now, I do want to say this probably isn't about telehealth and more about the person, but the feedback that we're getting that I just feel like I needed to share tonight was, they'd turn off their camera, they'd take a shower, they'd have a bottle next to them. So I like to say, Troy and Ethos, I know you guys very well. There's programs out there that keep it very accountable and keep you showing up and keeping you diligent. But telehealth services have played an impact in people's recovery. Really, it's kept them out a little bit longer, because as Troy talked about, without consequences, you have no need or desire to change. So if you're able to avoid some consequences for just a little bit longer, you're going to progress a little bit further before you get to that place of desperation and ask for help. Virtual meetings. So again, this is a blessing in that people were able to stay connected to their 12-step programming and other support groups in a pandemic where they couldn't access support otherwise. Fortunately, today, so many meetings have gone back in person, so people have been able to reconnect. But one of the biggest challenges that we were experiencing was with our first timers, people who had never been in treatment before and people who had never been in the rooms of a 12-step program before. So they never knew what it was like to walk into a church basement and get that, that physical greeting that you experience. They didn't know what it was like to go to a diner and have a dinner right after a meeting. They didn't know the quality of fellowship that could come from a program. And we were doing a lot more work attempting to engage them to get connected than we typically had ever done before. So we started a much more intensive alumni program to hook people in a little bit harder to get them to connect, to see the values of the program. We did not have that same challenge when things were in person. So we do attribute that to the lack of vulnerability that happens when you're on a screen. I wanted to put a slide in here for COVID impact on staffing and resources, because I think that changes the treatment environment. There's a higher risk of staff burnout with COVID. They're working constantly. There's constant change. There's nothing is ever staying the same. We're changing social distancing. We're changing how many people can be in a room. We're changing our mask mandate. We're changing our vaccine status. It's just change. Change produces stress for not just our patients, but for our staff. Prior to the pandemic, if you had a runny nose, you showed up to work. Prior to the pandemic, if you had a cold, you came to work. And now all of a sudden, we're in an environment where you can't show up to the job if you have symptoms, which lends to a staffing crisis, because people are constantly not able to return to work until they have negative COVID testing. And what happens there, remember, we're in detox and inpatient, so we never closed. Our staff kept showing up and kept showing up. So you talk about this on top of the unknown of showing up to work in the middle of a pandemic that you had no idea what was going to happen. It really lends to our mental health providers, the healthy helper model, if you will. So let me go back. So when all of our resources start to shift, or they're calling out, or they have to get furloughed until testing, what happens is that the current resources in the building have to do double the work to treat the patient just as effectively. So it's just important for me to put a blast out there in case there's any professionals on the meeting, just healthy helper. And it's trying times and it's hard and we don't know it. We never had this experience before, so we're all trying to do the best that we can with what we have. Treatment modalities. So how has treatment shifted and changed? My primary thing that just came into my mind was individualized treatment services and specialty services. The landscape of addiction has changed. It always does. And treatment always changes with it. For as long as I've seen, treatment always changes as the disease progresses. But what are we really working with now? What we're working with now is a very individualized model of care. So I'm a very big believer that the canvas of addiction treatment needs to be the same. The core fundamentals have to be there. Psychoeducation, fellowship groups, understanding what is addiction. But once you get kind of those basics down and the canvas is the background, the paint that you use on that canvas can vary. And that depends on who's presenting in front of you. So we talked about higher acuity mental health. You'll see a lot of programs are increasing the mental health providers that they have. They're getting more psychiatric coverage because the presentation is drastically different and the mental health needs are different. You see a lot more psychiatric nurse practitioners coming on board staffing. We see a lot more skill building groups, a lot more DBT usage, dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a very skill-based modality of care. It gives people tangible skills for emotional regulation. You see a lot more CBT. Trauma. Troy, thank you for bringing up trauma when you talked about that, because this is significant. Everybody likes to throw around the word trauma, and most programs are trauma competent, most programs are trauma informed, and that's great. They probably should be in 2022. But when you look at the patient coming in with trauma, some of them need a much more tailored approach to treatment. And we can't be all things to all people. And I think that's very important of treatment providers to understand that you can't be all things to all people. So really assessing whether or not we can treat what's in front of us, assuming that we're assessing that somebody is stabilized enough, is resourced enough, has the containment skills emotionally to work on their trauma, you'll see a lot more carve-out programming happening to treat these individuals to get a little bit more intensive trauma treatment while they're in the inpatient levels of care. This can be controversial. You'll hear people talk about don't do trauma work in inpatient. I disagree. I think that with the appropriate assessment, that somebody is resourced and they're contained and they're not going to flood out, you can do some phenomenal stabilizing trauma work in an inpatient level of care to foster the growth for somebody like Troy to take on an outpatient basis, your 24/7 supervision and support. Relapse prevention. So we've recognized that we're seeing a lot more relapses. All of treatment is relapse prevention. But when we talk about relapse as it applies to somebody who's had stable remission, we saw a lot more relapses from people who were stable in recovery. And that's important. That's very different than somebody who's in and out of treatment, a couple months here, a couple months, come back into treatment and in and out the door. Those individuals who were stable in remission, I'm talking about years in remission and on solid ground, we saw an increase in them coming in. So we made a decision that we needed to do something different and do carve-out programming for those individuals. And what we found is that their relapses were drastically altered by their trauma, their experiences, and their unresolved core issues, and how those experiences altered the way in which they think. How we think impacts how we act. So if we recognize that if we could target their thinking and how they saw themselves, how they saw others, and how they saw the world around them, typically derived from their unresolved core issues, we could support them in staying connected to the program that was going to help them stay sober, whatever program that is, right? So we did carve out programming for that. And then another thing that you'll see in a lot of treatment centers is increase in family support services. We have always known that addiction is a family disease. That is not new to us. But what I believe I've been seeing is new is so many resources becoming available to the family. You'll see many programs bringing in family therapists, family support service coordinators. All of that is phenomenal, because if it's a family disease and we're only treating the patient, we have a problem, especially if the patient is going back into the family dynamic. So that's something that is on the rise that I hope to continue to see being built. And Kim, I mean, you're proof of that. So thank you. And then medication-assisted treatment options we talked about. So where do we see success in treatment? So I just want to be really honest with you. This hasn't changed. Longer length of stays produce better outcomes. And Troy, I think you said it too. This is the fundamental basic of addiction treatment. Longer length of stays produce better outcomes. And we're fighting insurance companies day in and day out to provide people with the help that they need to stay longer. Engaging a client in a full continuum of care. Troy, you also mentioned this. The continuum of care was designed for a reason. So you increase stress as you decrease treatment, and collectively you learn how to manage your life back. So a typical continuum of care would be, your detox and inpatient stay, a partial hospital program, an intensive outpatient program, an outpatient program. And coupled with that would be hopefully some type of sober living environment that's likely not returning home immediately upon discharge out of the inpatient unit. What else creates success is the clear skills to support areas of concern. If people are not leaving with clear-cut skills to manage stuck points, to manage warning signs, to manage their triggers, they're going to do what they know how to do. We need to be providing them with tangible things to utilize. an individualized care plan. So the individualized care plan is not just in the treatment of inpatient and detox, but the aftercare plan. Are they set up for success, like Troy talked about, holistically? Are we looking at their gym? Are we looking at their physical activity? Are we looking at their eating? I mean, I happen to come from a program that's very holistic. We do yoga, acupuncture, meditation every day with our patients, but really putting into place a plan for them that incorporates mind, body, and spirit on top of their clinical needs. So if they need trauma treatment, we're connecting them with that. If they need mental health, they have an appointment when they leave. It's very, very important is that the aftercare plan in place is one that's going to promote long-term success. And then the other piece that we've seen success with is involving the family in treatment, as we talked about in treating the entire system. So I don't know if I went overboard. Sorry, Kim, if I did, if I went over time. But that's
Great.
in general.
Great stuff, though, Val. That was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, let me try to get out of here for you. Stop share. There we
go. Thank you very much, Val. That was great. And you had me at family. I love it when I hear people mention how important it is for the family to be involved in the recovery process. So thank you for that. All right, Brooke and Matt, are you guys ready to unmute?
Yes. Hi, we are Sunlight of the Spirit Recovery Houses. This is my son, sorry. So we are located in Montgomery County, and we have 5 houses. We do accept MAT, so we have seen a lot of Sublocade shot, high rise and Suboxone. We always have taken the Vivitrol shot, naloxone.
So yeah, as to like Troy's comment too about like people not getting caught, like during COVID we saw like a big drop and people even wanted to come to recovery houses. A lot of people didn't even want to come, but that has changed over the past probably 6 months. We've seen like a spike, probably busier than we've ever been before. A lot of people that have coming to us are like heroin addicts. We saw a lot of people on heroin and fentanyl, but we've seen like a switch to methamphetamines, like Valerie was talking about. It's a huge, like, and when you talk to the people, you're like, they'll say like, I used to be a heroin addict and I switched to methamphetamine because everybody was dying, and they just switched addictions. And so that's something that we've seen. Like there's been like a large uptick in like telehealth as a means of treatment, and some people like it and it's really beneficial for some people. It's very effective. But we've also seen like most of our residents actually prefer in-person treatment. They like the going to a meeting, being in a group, seeing people one-on-one, getting feedback from one another. Yeah. So that's I'd say most of our clients actually prefer the in-person. But I think it's great that telehealth is taken off and there's that option, because treatment's more accessible to people, and that's really what we need, right?
Yeah, a lot of our residents don't drive, so for people who can't get to the facility, it's great, but also you're lacking that connection, that personal experience with the therapist, and there's just the screen. So
yeah, we've also seen a big shift into MAT. We've got people coming into our house on MAT. We've gotten people coming to our house on Suboxone for alcohol cravings before. Like we've had I'd say like 50% of our calls nowadays are for people that are on some form of MAT. What we see most commonly, we haven't seen the Vivitrol shot as much. I don't know if it's because it's more expensive for the insurance companies or what it is, but we see more Sublocade, and we still see a lot of Suboxone. We do have an MAT house. We do allow people on MAT. Sublocade, like as Valerie was saying, it's a really good option for MAT. It's a game changer, it really is. But there is still issues that we see from a medication management perspective, So it's great because we'll allow people on Sublocade to any of our houses, because we don't have to, like, for our MAT program, we have like cameras, we have a med log, we have a complicated process for people taking their medication, but with the Sublocade, we can allow them at any house. But what we have found is sometimes people will take Suboxone on top of their Sublocade and try and get high off that, So that's some of the issues that we've seen in the past. We also, just from like a 12-step community standpoint, we see a lot of stigma. Like there's still like a lot of stigma for people on MAT, and it's really probably the biggest barrier that I have as a recovery house owner, wanting to see these people succeed is that they're not being readily accepted into 12-step programs, which is what's available. You don't see as many smart recovery meetings, Dharma recovery meetings, that kind of stuff available as much, So what we like to see with people coming in on MAT is them to be in some kind of long-term IOP, PHP, IOP, OP, and that's the most beneficial, because they're being accepted more readily at those programs than they are at 12-step programs, which I hope is going to change soon, and I think it will, as the face of addiction changes, really.
And one thing I want to add to that is I think that being at the recovery house is a big benefit for someone who doesn't feel super connected to a 12-step program, because the house is like a family. And it's like you're living in a family environment, in a neighborhood, in a nice house, and everyone there gets what you're going through. So if you're having trouble connecting with people in a 12-step program, or you feel like you're not sober by their definition, it's great that you're like living with all these people who are also going through the exact same thing that you're going through and are doing a lot better in their lives, because we're setting them up with jobs, we're setting them up with aftercare if they haven't had it already. We're bringing in alumni that have gone through the house, are successful on MAT, coming back and helping those individuals. So that lack of connection that you might not be getting at a 12-step meeting, you're getting in the house because of that family environment. So I just think that's like a benefit too.
Yeah, totally. The other thing that was brought up is like virtual meetings and stuff like that, which has been awesome, because people are able to go to meetings at any time. You can hop on the computer and get in a meeting in Australia in the middle of the night or whatever, and that's great, but there's also it's a double-edged sword with that, is because I think Valerie was saying as well, is that, we'll have people that I made 5 meetings this week, but they had their phone in the pocket the whole time, never shook anyone's hair. It doesn't really have a sponsor, so like as things have loosened up a little bit, we're trying to push our residents to, get back into the, have one-on-one meet up with a sponsor, go to meetings in person, if they feel comfortable, so we can actually have that accountability. But yeah, I think you guys, I want to thank everybody that shared before us. There was so much good stuff said, and it really had me thinking about a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, we had a video about our housing, but for the sake of time, we'll forgo it. We did just want to say that, it is a really good step for someone who's coming out of the bubble of inpatient, that's going to go home, but maybe home's not a safe environment, or maybe it's a really safe environment where everybody helps you out, mom pays for things, and it's very comfortable, but it's not challenging you going back into the world, and it's not connecting you with other people in recovery. So we are like that next step. It's like a baby step down, where you can still attend outpatient, you can be in a community that accepts you for who you are, and be connected with resources to help you, get back on your feet.
That is so great. And, Brooke, if you guys have a link to that video, we can absolutely put it on the follow-up page that people can access it. And I love what you just said too about the environment being a safer place for folks in early recovery, because, I share this a lot when I'm with other parents in our support group meetings. I didn't want to be the house manager in my own house. I did not want to have to, your boundaries are so much better than mine with my kid, and I also hope people understand that different sources of recovery housing have different levels of structure and restrictions and things like that. And sometimes there's step down and different things. Could you just share a little bit about that, about what structure might look like for different residents?
Yes. I think when you're looking for a recovery house, that's a really important question to ask, is what is the structure like? And we have all of our rules, like we have a whole rule packet that we read to each individual resident when they come in, so they can, we make sure they understand what they're signing up for. And we can email that to the parents to make sure they know that this is a very safe environment. We do check, so we make sure that everyone's attending 12-step based meetings according to their phase in like a house-based system. So the longer you're there, the less stringent we are, but we're still making sure that you're meeting with your sponsor, someone that's helping you go through the steps on a weekly basis. You're attending 12-step based meetings. You're attending outpatient if you have that. We have a curfew. We are doing drug and alcohol screens on a weekly basis and sometimes more. They're random. So we're alleviating the family from all that worry. So they're on the right track. But they're still they have family visitations. They earn overnights. So there's incentive to do well so that they can have more freedom.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and after being in our program for a while, you step into more like an independent living. So like once you get to phase 3, it's like you're able to like take overnights every weekend, and you'll be eligible to stay at like sober houses, which aren't structured, basically more like apartment style. But that comes like later on. But yeah, the parents really should be looking at like, is there a structure, and is the structure actually followed at that program? So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Well, I'm sure we'll get back to you if we have any more questions coming up. But now it's time for Ray. If you want to unmute, and I'd love to hear from you. Ray, thank you so much. Ray is a person in recovery, and just so grateful for you being here and sharing some of your story with us. Thank you.
Yep, I'm Ray. I'm an addict and alcoholic in recovery. Thanks, Kim, for inviting me tonight and the opportunity to participate and in my recovery and help others. And, I wanted to congratulate everyone who's attending because, as it was mentioned, this is a family disease. And I think it's important that, there's help for you too. As I found out later that I needed further help, and I'm part of not just Alcoholics Anonymous, but also Al-Anon. And the Al-Anon has given me tools to cope with my other family members that, are still active in their addiction. I came from a long line of functioning alcoholics, as they like to say. And it's in my family genes. I believe whatever path my life would have gone, that I would have ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous one way or another. And I'm just grateful that I surrendered when I did. My life is extremely good today. My road to surrender was not an easy one. I started, as kids do, teenage years, experimenting mostly with cannabis. And that was easier to get in my years as a teenager. So I found very quickly that I was doing that on a regular basis. Alcohol was more on the parties on the weekends, experimenting with hallucinogenics, cocaine in college, other things, but that was pretty much it. I was always able to manage, life and school and earn good grades and do well at work, and kind of put on that exterior front that I had my life together. And that went on for a long time. It wasn't even when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that, my life was really not that bad. I had just gotten promoted at work, and I was doing extremely well in all phases of life. But when I looked at myself in the mirror every morning, I just felt like I hated myself. And I was, it says in our big book that, the alcoholic enjoys we're like a stage character, or a director of a play trying to direct the play. And, we have a certain, stage character we want the world to see, but we enjoy a certain reputation, but in the inside, we realize we don't feel like we deserve it. And, that was me, my dad has been in and out of the program for a long time. He's not been able to stay stopped. I'm the oldest of 3. And my brother got paralyzed in a tragic snowboarding accident when I was 18. And I remember at 18, really, when that happened, I started drinking to numb out feelings and using other substances to get through that uncomfortability of feelings and life. And I had lost 27 friends to this disease, friends and family. most through the opioid epidemic, some from alcohol, but mostly from opioids. And my surrender, I finally was getting a lot of pressure from outside, from family and this and that, to come and check out AA. And I was really more or less going there to check the box and say, see, it didn't work for me. And I did. I put the drink down, but I still struggle with cannabis, because now cannabis was getting legalized. And I'm like, well, I need that because I can't drink. And, now marijuana is legal. So I got a medical card, and I was picking up, cannabis and going to meetings. And man, I just felt like a fraud. Like, here are all these wonderful people at AA that are trying to help me, but yet I'm using cannabis on the side. And after 8 months of doing that, I cried and brought all my coins back and said, this is what I've been doing. And, it was hard. I was also, my doctors had prescribed me to benzodiazepams, and I was on Ativan. And at the end, I was on like 3 milligrams a day. So I had quit alcohol, but I was still using cannabis and benzos on a pretty regular basis. And, I had help from, I didn't go to rehab. I didn't go, I should have, now that I look back in hindsight and see how painful that was to get through that cold turkey and taper off on my own. But I was able to do that. And I had assistance from my counselor, Mike, from Ethos, who gave me assistance on how to taper off the benzos. After 22 months of not drinking and trying to manage my alcoholism with these other substances, or an easier, softer way, I picked up a drink again. And the worst thing that can happen to an alcoholic is nothing. The first night, nothing happened. It was just beer. And in my head, I thought, hey, there's people at AA they're not right about me, and I'm not as bad as them. And then the next night I drank beer and bourbon, and I woke up the next day like, oh my gosh, I don't remember what I did last night. And I quit my job. I told my boss I quit. And I had that old familiar fear of, oh no, what did I do last night? Well, turns out I got my job back. I got home, and the difference was I came right back to the 307 Clubhouse in Westchester, Pennsylvania, where I live. And I've been going to AA every single day since. And I came back for myself. I didn't come back for my parents. I didn't come back for my wife, my kids at that point. I wasn't coming for anyone but me. And that's why it's worked. I threw myself into the middle of this fellowship. I immediately started trying to help people. They say if you have 2 days, you can help the person with 1. So I jumped right in with both feet. And didn't know what to do with all my free time. So I was going to, multiple meetings a day. And I got a really good sponsor. I started working the 12 steps. I started visiting my therapist biweekly from Ethos. And I needed all the help that I could get. And after getting 90 days for the 3rd time and being allowed to be into service, I jumped into service right away and trying to share what I've learned with other people. It hasn't all been easy. I lost my brother-in-law to cancer. I lost my best friend last year, who we were in recovery together, and I found him in recovery. He had 2 months more than me, and he picked up last year on my birthday and overdosed. And, there's a lot of, this thing is very fragile. Recovery is extremely fragile. I'm just grateful for every single day that God gives me. I've developed my own understanding of a higher power and God. I've really gotten deep into prayer and meditation, and mostly meditation, because I was someone who couldn't sit by myself for more than 15 seconds without having to react. So I started practicing it on a daily basis. And I hear a lot of people around the program saying, yeah, I tried meditating. It didn't work for me. And I said, yeah, well, I stink at shooting basketballs. But I bet if I tried it every single day for about 10 minutes for 90 days in a row, I'm going to start sinking some jump shots. So I started doing it every single day. And today I can really get myself into, I started with going to family centers in Malvern and listening to some guided ones. I got a really good Brain FM has some really good guided meditations. And here I am, like, 8 months later, and I'm leading meditation meetings in the middle of the pandemic. I started meditation meetings in a park. We're going to pick it up this spring again when the weather gets a little bit warmer. I would encourage anybody, to come check it out. We do it in Westchester, and I'll put my number in the chat. So if anybody wants to get a hold of me afterward. But meditation has been a huge part for me, because I was someone who was constantly in a state of fear of what was going to happen in the future and beating myself up for what I did in the past. So staying in my moment each day, one moment at a time, took a lot of practice, but over time, it has been the greatest gift that I've ever gotten, is to be present in each moment. And what's most important to me right now is what I'm doing here with you guys. I'm not thinking about what I have to do in an hour or tomorrow or whatever. And that's a gift for me. And, the program has just given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. It really has. I thought I had this wife who didn't understand, and she used to be fun, and she doesn't want to party anymore. And and she's my best friend. In 12 years of marriage, the last 2.5 have been the best years of our marriage. I'm very present in my kids' life. I'm just teaching them how to ski. I'm doing all sorts of activities with my kids, and having 2 little kids keeps me very busy, especially with my job. I travel a lot for business. I'm in national sales. And, I always bragged about how many breweries I've been to throughout the country. I drove over between Christmas and New Year's. I was in Sterling, Virginia for business that week. And I drove like 50 miles out of my way to go to a meeting in West Virginia to get my 25th state, a live meeting in my 25th state. And I'm trying to get to all 50. This is a whole new world that's opened up to me, that I've been able to connect with alcoholics all over the country. Last Tuesday, I drove up to Albany, New York, and caught a meeting with my friend from Westtown Zoom, which is a meeting that's every single night at 8:30 p.m. You can find it on the meeting guide app. And we fellowship after the meeting. So when the meeting ends, we don't just hit bye and leave and no one's there. We all hang out and talk for 15 minutes. We help newcomers. And we have a live meeting in Westchester, which is at the Advent Lutheran Church every Friday night at 8:30 p.m. And I'm there almost every Friday. So, we fellowship there too. We go to dinners, we hang out before and after the meeting. I didn't get sober to just sit in an AA meeting and bitch about how I can't drink and use anymore. I really enjoy the fellowship and living life. And, I got really into Frisbee golf. It's a very inexpensive hobby. There's Frisbee golf courses all over the country. You can buy 3 discs for less than $50, and you can go and try to hit little baskets with Frisbees and play with your friends. And I've taken a lot of newcomers out and taught them how to play. And it's just so much fun. It's just, if anything, you stink, it's going for a hike in the woods and fellowshipping with other people. And it's great. I started a ski and sober group in recovery, and we just got back from our first adventure in Sugarbush. And that was on Sunday that we returned. Of course, I went up there on Tuesday night, tied it into a work trip, and saw my friends from Westtown who fellowship with us from Albany, New York, went to his home group meeting. Then I met up with my other friend who I know from the fellowship, and he came down and met me in Killington on Wednesday. And I only know him through the fellowship. Then on Thursday, I had the whole group show up. I did another day solo at Killington by myself. And then I had 5 friends from this area show up and go to ski and sober. And we called a meeting that I was already at before up there and introduced them to that group. And we had my friend who lives up there bring his friends from his home group to fellowship and ski with us. So, we had this cast of characters that was just revolving around us the whole weekend. And, these guys who are somewhat newer are like, wow, like this is what recovery is like. And I'm like, yeah, and I actually had happy tears It was bluebird skies. I could see all the way to Canada and Whiteface and Lake Placid, New York, and all the way to Mount Washington. And I was like, I didn't know my life could be this good in recovery, you know, and that's what this fellowship has given me, because I've jumped in with both feet. You know, we're all connected. And the reason I know that is because the man who gave me my first drink when I was 7 years old at my uncle's rehearsal dinner just got his 17-year coin at my home group this year on the same day that I was getting my 2-year coin. And I don't get held up on the fact that like I have a little bit of time in this program, because I have a whole stack of different coins that I picked up. But my favorite coin is just my my white chip that I got from my friend Dane at the Min Hill Group in Charlotte, North Carolina. He just had his first baby, and I know that because we still talk. And I told him when he gave me my chip that I was getting my last surrender chip and I'm never getting one again. And you know, I have to remember that, because I only have today. That's all that matters, and that's all that I have to do is just practice today. You know, helping others, trust God, clean house, and help others. And that's what the steps have done for me. I'm an old-fashioned AA person, I guess, in today's world. I Zoom so I can try to help people, but I didn't drink or use virtually. So I go to a lot of live meetings. I show up, I go to live meetings, I meet people in parks, I'll meet people on runs. We go for runs a lot. We do lots of hikes. We do lots of fun stuff in recovery. And for me, it's all about getting outside, living life, and sharing this gift of life with others who are struggling like me. And Al-Anon has given me tools to cope with the other people in my life. And, you know, the best thing I can do is not enable them to you know, to be a good example of what a sober person looks like. And the less I enable them, the quicker they find their bottom, and the chances go up of them getting sober and getting help. But it's not up to me. It's an inside job. Happiness is an inside job. Recovery is an inside job. And it's up to each individual to fight for their own recovery and fight for their own happiness. And if they want it bad enough, they can do it. And I'm living proof, because I've been through Las Vegas. I've been through many cities. I've had to sit through dinners. My career is surrounded with booze, surrounded with cannabis and other things. And you know what? I don't have to take a drink or drug to live life and feel as good as I do today. And that's a gift. So I'll put my name and number in the chat. If anybody needs help, if anyone needs, I also am at the Hair of the Dog meeting. It's in Westchester at the Melton Center. It's every single day of the year, rain, snow, no matter what, 365 days a year at the Melton Center, 7 a.m. every single day. Come there. If someone needs help, we're there to help them. Same with Westtown on Friday nights, 8:30 p.m. at the Advent Lutheran Church in Westchester at 1601 Green Lane. I'm Ray, and I'm an addict and alcoholic, and I'm grateful to be sober today. Thanks.
Holy cow, that was amazing. Oh my God. This is just, and I know people are going to start telling you, yay for you. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's just always so inspiring to hear these kinds of stories. I mean, geez, that was beautiful. And I love how you talked about all the fun things that aren't doing, you know, I know that young people, especially when they first find recovery, there's so much resentment about all the things they have to give up, and they're really just not getting it yet, that their whole life is ahead of them. And it's just, they're not going to be in a game room anymore. They're going to get out in life and connect with wonderful people like you. So that's really touching. I'm really choked up. Okay. So we have some really good questions. So someone asked about Suboxone maintenance. This person has a relative who's been on Suboxone maintenance for 1.5 years. Is it safe to be on it that long? Val, would you like to take that question?
I mean, truthfully, we usually defer to the doctors, prescribing physicians, and other medical professionals who prescribe. I will say we have seen people come into treatment that have sustained remission for long periods of time. It's not uncommon to see that. But in terms of, is it safe? I don't want to pretend I'm a medical doctor. So I would defer to them. But I will tell you that we do see it. We do see it often, that people are on long-term Suboxone use.
Yeah. Troy, did you want to add anything, or anyone else? Anything?
Yeah. Thank you. I want to thank you, Ray. That was right on. I want to like also like come in with like not come in, but support what Valerie said. Like I'm not a medical professional, but like we usually, I think most professionals try to shorten the length of time that people are on it if possible. We don't want to stigmatize it, of course, but we're trying to get people to a place where they're not necessarily on that if they don't need it, because there seems to be, the longer they're on there, it seems to be the longer chance for abuse. It just seems that way in my experience. But again, there are some people that need to be on it long term. And I can't say what the dangers are, but again, when we're talking about the holistic approach, if it works, they're working the job, they're going to meetings, they're doing what they need to do, they're staying sober, they're helping their family, they're taking care of business and doing things that are making them happy. It's working, right? You know what I mean? It's working. And I think at the end of the day, whatever biases somebody may have against it or whatever, maybe they need to keep them to themselves if it's working for that person. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think it's also important to remind everyone that the A in MAT is assisted treatment. So the medication assisted treatment, that means this is not the panacea. This is not going to stop your addiction. This is going to help with the cravings and so on. And what we're talking a lot about are for opioids and alcohol. And there is no MAT for methamphetamines, for cannabis, for benzodiazepine. Is that right about benzo? I'm not sure if that's true about benzos. I don't think there is MAT for benzos necessarily, is there?
But also, Kim, can I add to that too?
Yeah.
And I think also one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize with medication-assisted treatment is that they should be in therapy, right? And they should be seeing a psychiatrist or a doctor regularly, or even just a group, not just AA or 12 steps or Dharma or Smart Recovery. They should also be having that assisted part facilitated and maintained, right? Not just, okay, I'm going to get my shot and just go about my business. Not that I'm just going to, because you're still being treated by a medical professional who's prescribing your medication. So therapy should be a part of that. That's just my take on it.
Yes.
I second that 100%. It is not to be used in a silo. For sure.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. And also, Ray, someone had asked if they could get the information on the meeting guide app that you mentioned. Is there like a link or something that you can share, or?
I can post the Zoom information and the addresses of both locations where the meetings are and the time of those.
Awesome. If
Yeah,
you can.
I found them online. I can paste I can send it from Google's App Store and Apple's App Store as well.
Awesome.
Perfect. And then I'll put those on that follow-up page as well. Excellent. Thank you. So someone asked, do you have any recommendations for our best place to find names of providers approved to use Sublocade who are contracted with Blue Cross? Finding providers has been challenging.
That is challenging. I mean, we typically utilize the website and probably do exactly what you folks are doing. The amount of case management that it takes, even in our levels of care, to find providers is very, very challenging. I wish I could offer you a different trick, but I have a feeling we're probably doing the exact same searching.
And I think also too, I think something for all of us, and especially for clients and parents and mothers and guardians and caregivers out there, that should be advocated with your insurance provider. Say, listen, this is hard for me to navigate, right? Like, can you make this easier for not only me and my family, but for future families? You're paying your insurance. It shouldn't be that difficult if you're providing this service. Because I think a lot of times what I find with dealing with certain parents or caregivers or adults or anyone, they don't think they have the right to advocate for themselves with an insurance provider, as if the insurance provider is going to cut them off. I strongly urge clients to advocate for yourself with your insurance providers. And you know what I mean? You're a customer, right? And you can advocate in a very polite, strong, forceful way and be kind at the same time and get the same results without yelling and screaming. But, go up the chain and say, hey, this shouldn't be that difficult, right? It shouldn't be that difficult. And that's my take on that. So thank you.
And if I could just add, real quick, whoever's putting that person on the initial Sublocade would initially get the authorization and approval for the medication. So if they are getting it in a level of care like an inpatient unit, it's our responsibility to ensure that they have a follow-up appointment and an aftercare plan. And that's really just integrity, that's ethics, that's good patient care. And I'm not saying that it doesn't at times can fall off it, and we have unfortunately a couple of those scenarios that have happened. But ultimately, providers should be supporting the aftercare placement. So if the person is put on Sublocade at an inpatient level of care, they should 100% be supporting an aftercare placement, which includes running an insurance benefit and knowing if it's going to be an authorized medication on the outpatient.
And I mentioned benzos, and somebody has asked specifically about MAT for benzos. It's a little tricky, isn't it, Val? Is there really anything?
We do not use any MAT for benzos. There are some studies going out for like methamphetamine MAT. Nothing is approved though. That's naloxone and Wellbutrin actually are what the trials are on. I've heard that with meth. I've not heard anything with benzos.
I've heard of certain clients being, sorry if I talked over you, I apologize. I've heard of certain clients being prescribed other medications to treat the anxiety, not necessarily take away the cravings, that will replace the feeling that the benzo is creating for them, right? I forgot there's one medication, but I've had clients prescribe certain other medications that have a cross effect, right? With no addictive qualities to that medication. So I think one's a blood pressure, but don't quote me on it again. I'm not a doctor or a psychiatrist.
Thank you. And Troy, you mentioned psychedelic assisted therapy, and someone is asking about that. So if any of you would like to go a little deeper on that as a pathway to recovery.
I think it's so new that I'm very wary of it because of the side effect profile with psychedelics that is known and unknown, right? I think it takes a specially trained provider to know how to do it properly. I think it's much bigger on the West Coast than I think it's on the East Coast. From talking to friends of mine that live on the West Coast, what I've seen anecdotally is that it has led to people who already have a predisposition for abuse, right, to take it to another level on their own. I've seen people, I've had clients, I said, what happened? Well, I tried ketamine during my therapy sessions and I ended up becoming addicted to it. So I don't know where the future is, but like personally, I think it's a very slippery slope if it's not a well-trained provider. And I have to be really honest. I've seen providers when Valerie talked about ethics. I've seen providers go through these quick trainings and all of a sudden say, "Hey, Troy, by the way, I'm doing this type of assisted treatment now with ketamine or microdosing." I'm like, you seem kind of gung ho about this. So I just want to say, you got to be aware with any new treatment, any new treatment. That's just my thoughts on it, right? That's my thoughts. I don't want to say, yeah, go for it. It's just kind of new.
Yes, thank you very much. And someone has asked, and I see Judy's given them some response here. This is someone has a Bucks County client who's a veteran and using meth. Are there programs or recovery centers that focus on PTSD along with addiction?
I'm happy to take that. We have actually a first responders program at Miramont Treatment Center. It's a 9-hour clinical program in an IOP level of care and in residential. For some, it depends, obviously, the criteria that they would meet from a substance dependence, but we do offer it. The VA does have services as well. Sometimes those are challenging to get into, but outside of the VA, I know Miramont does offer first responder treatment and substance abuse treatment.
And I worked at the VA hospital here in Philadelphia for a long time ago. They definitely have programs there, but also I've heard great things about Miramont programs for first responders, right? I've heard great things about it from men and women who are very hard sells on treatment. So I'm glad you brought that up, Val. But the VA has gotten expanded greatly with MAT, with substance abuse treatment over the last year, especially when a couple of years ago, when the VA was getting, I guess you could say, called out on how they were treating veterans for all different types of ailments. So they have cleaned up their act somewhat. So they're really making a strong push on helping for mental health and substance abuse at VAs. And each VA has a different culture. So, like the one in Philadelphia might not be as good as the one in Coatesville. It just totally depends, right? So.
I see a question about if Miramont accepts medical assistance. It does accept some medical assistance.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for answering that. So someone has asked about, this is tough. Will a psychiatrist treat a person who has a known substance use disorder? And they would love a list of reputable counselors. And I think this is a challenge. I know finding psychiatrists who really do understand addiction, and those just do. Troy or Val, anyone want to address that? Or anybody who has any thoughts about that?
What I found is I try to urge clients, if you are looking for psychiatric care, please ask the psychiatrist, are you familiar with addiction? I've seen numerous over times, and I am not trying to talk bad about psychiatry at all, but I've seen psychiatrists prescribe medications that are habit forming and addicting, not knowing the full story behind the client, not only because the psychiatrist that know, but also the client was not forthcoming about their own medical history with addiction. So I can't blame it all on the psychiatrist, but I have seen numerous cases where psychiatrists aren't familiar with addiction, and there's kind of a mix up in the quality of care. And again, I think that's just when this program first began, when we talked about the challenges that we all face, whether it be in providers, whether we be customers, whether we be therapists, clinicians, of how to navigate proper care and proper services. I'm a big proponent of questioning your care provider, including me, right? I'm a big proponent of that. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to vet them just as though they're going to treat you with the amount of respect that you deserve. So ask those questions. Are you familiar with all substances, not just harder substances such as meth or opiates, like marijuana usage or benzo abuse, Adderall abuse? We have tons of clients that have been overprescribed Adderall or Ritalin. So I don't think it's any fault of any one psychiatrist, or it's not a mass conspiracy out there, but I just think we have to be very careful when we pick a provider dealing with someone who is a known chemically dependent person, past or present.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Troy. And I also think if you can get connected, if you're a part of an outpatient program to treat a substance use disorder, typically getting connected to their psychiatric services or somebody that they work with. Most reputable providers do have people that they typically work with if it's not within their own system. But Troy, I love that. Ask questions. Ask as many questions as you need. Vet anybody. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Someone has asked if patients, clients are getting younger. And I know that in parent groups, I can tell you that the parents who are showing up, their kids are younger. That's what I've experienced, at least in the last 12 years. Have you noticed that from your perspective?
I actually have to tell you, we've noticed the opposite. Our clients are getting older. Now, we don't know if that's just a result of some treatment centers have more amenities, maybe cater to the young adult differently than we do, but we have actually had the exact opposite experience. They're getting older.
It's funny. I'm on the same page with Val on this one again. Like my groups have been older. I'm not getting the 22, 25-year-old, 26-year-olds. My group is primarily historically, like 35 and up. I have a few young people here and there, but there's a lot more older people, 60, 58, 70. There's a lot more older people coming to me for services. Now that depends probably also which location of ethos that you're attending. But in my office, I've had a lot of older gentlemen, ladies, and women and men, and then even between not the young 19-year-olds, the 20-year-olds. I'm not seeing that. I'm just not. I'm seeing a much older population.
And I wonder how much of that is necessarily reflective, though, of how many younger people are struggling but aren't necessarily seeking treatment yet. You guys are seeing who's showing up for treatment, but I'm just wondering, and I'm thinking of the parents of adolescents who there's not necessarily the same kind of insurance coverage and access to treatment for a really young person. But that's really interesting that you both have that experience.
Yeah. And there are a lot of specialized programs for young adults and under 18. You just have to look for them, but they are out there. Somewhere on telehealth, somewhere in person. There's tons of programs though, and most of those programs do a wraparound approach where they try to provide more coaching, more guidance. A lot of those type of sober coaching modality treatments.
Got it. Awesome. Well, we're 2 minutes over. Wow, you guys, this has been amazing. It's flown by. Thank you all. What a phenomenal panel. I knew this was going to be good. This was so great. So please don't forget to take the survey as you leave this program this evening. It should pop up right away when you end, and visit that page, that follow-up page. You'll get an email 24 hours from now, like 7 o'clock tomorrow. You'll get an email from Zoom that has the link to that page as a reminder. But the video will be up sometime in the morning, tomorrow morning, to be available. And I'm going to try to get as many of the resources that we talked about in there from Ray and from other folks that we mentioned, so that that'll all be on that follow-up page as well. Thank you all. This was amazing. You guys were just great.
Thank you. It's great.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. This was great. Thank you guys all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thank you.
Enjoy the slopes.
Z's and more. All my friends left on Sunday morning and I stayed for an extra half day. So I already went 2 full days before them. And I'm going next week too. So
Good.
Nice.
I kind of, my addictions are much healthier these days.
Yay.
Right. Thanks for sharing your story too. That was powerful. That was great.
Well, you guys know where to find me. If you need, anyone needs help, send them to Westtown Zoom, send them to Westtown on Friday nights in Westchester, the Advent Lutheran Church. And the Hair of the Dog is every single day live, 7 a.m. It's on Zoom too, if someone's more comfortable with that. But either group will help them. So I'm at the live meetings and Zoom when I travel.
I love your enthusiasm, Ray. I love it. You know what I mean? I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. We're all in this together.
So good. All right, everyone. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Have a
Thanks.
good
Bye.
night.
Everyone.